Let's Talk Early Years, the podcast where we elevate our conversations as professionals. In studio with me today, educational coach Julie Keys. Our conversation today, coaching as a culture, elevating our professional practice. In today's episode, we explore how we will lead, listen, and show up for the children in our care, for our colleagues, and for our parents as stakeholders. Welcome in studio, Julie Keys.
Thank you.
You
Thank
look
you.
amazing in your new dress.
I'm matching your set.
You do.
Yeah.
On brand and
Yes.
on point.
Exactly.
Yes.
Always be on brand. That's what
I
I
love
think.
it. I spoke in episode 1 of season 3 to Kelly Lindbergh, and we spoke about branding.
Yes.
And so profound that you're raising that as a topic of interest.
opening.
Yes,
Yeah.
because I think that as educators, we can't see ourselves in that space,
Yeah.
building our own
Personal
brand.
brand.
Yes. And so off the back of that, who is Julie Keys?
Oh, gosh. Great question. Well, when you think about personal brand, I mean, yes, I love yellow, but obviously a brand is built not just on visual identity, but in terms of what people associate with you when they see you. And I hope current, who is Julie Keys, and I can talk about different versions of my identity as my life has gone on, but current version of Julie Keys is hopefully when people see me come into their school, they go, and they remember, how do we have high quality conversations here? That is the brand, which is how do we have great conversations, and how does that lead to impact with our colleagues and ultimately with children.
Right. I love that. But you haven't mentioned your background. Please do. Tell
Okay.
us what you're leveraging off and how that has brought you to the... Also, interestingly, I spoke with Stephanie Martin in a previous conversation. She's also a former educator.
Yes.
Completely pivoted her career into becoming a speaker and a coach, a speaking coach,
Yes.
part of the many things she does. So please share with us, and encourage the educators out there for, potential other options outside of teaching, and tell us what you're
Oh,
doing.
Melanie, I don't want to lure people out of education. Actually, no, you're right. As educators, I think we forget the multitude of skills and experience that we have. So my background is that I have been a teacher for my whole life. It was, other than considering nursing for a brief moment, it's always been the thing that I wanted to do. And I would say that after university. So I was thinking, maybe nursing, maybe teaching. And I realised that came from not because I was desperately interested in medicine or anything like that. It came from wanting to make people a better version of themselves.
Wow.
And education does that.
Absolutely.
And I felt like that was coming from a place of, strength. Like we're working with kind of our raw materials, which are the children, and making them the best version of themselves. And so I've been an educator since I left university. I worked in schools in the UK, state schools, secondary schools, primary school, prep school, which in the UK goes up to 13. And then I met my lovely husband, long-suffering husband. It's our anniversary.
Happy anniversary!
This weekend.
Wow!
Yeah, so
and you've come to studio. Thank you. Thank you.
It's 13 years, unlucky for some. But we met teaching, and then we went abroad. We taught in Malaysia, we taught in an all-through school, brand new international British curriculum school in Malaysia. Loved that. Then came back to the UK. I worked as a deputy head in a primary school, and then then I left there and I started doing what I was doing in a different version. So there was kind of like an iteration as we went from consultancy to coaching being the main focus. And then we decided to move to Dubai, and my husband is teaching at a school here, and I'm doing the work that I'm doing here.
Where can our audience find you?
Oh, great question. Thank you for signposting. I can be found in lots of places. Predominantly our website, which is me forever tinkering with that. So please forgive me, audience, if you go on there and you're like, what? It looks completely different. I can never leave it alone. I'm always just
I
tinkering.
love it. It's that elevation all the time,
Yes.
that improvement.
Just always just a little, oh, can we change this? And I have a great person who works alongside me who somehow manages to get inside my brain, see the visuals and make it reality. So the website is theeducationalcoach.co.uk, and I'm also on LinkedIn, and I'm also on Instagram at The Educational Coach.
I love it. I love that you've pivoted your career, staying with helping people to become the best versions of themselves.
Absolutely.
But that you have, in the process, become the best version of yourself.
Oh, such a great reflection, because I really do truly believe that, actually. And it's a really nice moment for you to say that, because I don't often reflect on the impact it's had for me, if you see what I mean. Because I'm, you know, as educators, we're minded to always think, what's the impact for the other person?
Yes.
But actually taking that moment to kind of say, no, I'm really right where I'm supposed to be right now.
Absolutely.
I'm doing exactly the work I should be doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I do feel that.
And off that, I want to say thank you.
Oh.
Thank you for taking the time to be here with us,
you.
Julie. And thank you for stepping out. You know, I think as educators, again, speaking about branding previously, but even just about pivoting our careers, I don't think we always recognize the myriad of opportunities that are out there because of the amount of skill that resides on the inside of us. You know, we have so many transferable skills as educators, you know, and so you've leveraged just off one and become an educational coach.
Yes.
What would that mean? What does that mean?
So it might be helpful for me to tell you how I found it, because for me, coaching wasn't necessarily a word outside of sport that I had really heard about. And if anyone knows me, I'm sort of completely unsporty. So the coaching in a sporting sense is probably something that terrified me. But I was doing a piece of work with a school that was consultancy, and we were looking at digital strategy, and right during that time, COVID happened. And so actually I was very well placed because they were pivoting to online learning, and I was the digital strategy consultant, so they kept me on, which was amazing.
Yes.
But what happened during that time was I started doing a lot of one-to-ones with people, because they were really billed as let's work on your skill. Like, let me show you how to access Google Classroom or upload a document, or all of this kind of stuff that you thought, so many educators needed some of that guidance.
Yes.
However, those one-to-ones were the first time I really had this crossover of personal and professional. People were panicked during that time. Everything had been thrown up, and then like, now what? The natural order of schools had changed. So there were lots of really experienced teachers for whom accessing technology was now the barrier. So the people who kind of rose to the top were the people who could deliver well online. That wasn't necessarily
a skill
the most experienced teacher anymore. So the hierarchy had been disrupted. So I came across a lot of emotion, a lot of
uncertainty, yes, anxiety,
and it wasn't just about tech, it was about identity and these big issues. And I came away from those sessions feeling like, gosh, this is a lot, but also overwhelmingly, I love this. And that sounds a little bit strange in the moment.
I love that I'm able to bring the help that's needed in this moment. I think that's what you recognized.
Yes, so that it doesn't sound quite so selfish. But I came away, I was like, wow, I really love this. We started at this point at the beginning of the session. At the end, I see impact. They're going away feeling relief, action, whatever, focus, whatever they needed in that moment, they were going away with that. And I sort of thought to myself, oh, that's interesting, you know, I don't know, an interesting new feeling. And I happened to be talking to another colleague, and she said, it sounds like what you're doing is coaching. And I said, okay, I have never really explored this. I felt like maybe I was, I don't know, fairly predisposed to that kind of talking type thing. You know, I'd always been interested in professional development through my different in-school roles. But I had never really formally thought, oh, that's what we're doing here.
Right. I mean, even as an educator, if you're saying predisposed, this is again just one of our skills. We
Yes.
just naturally, sit with the child, coach them into, would you like to try this? Or maybe you'd like to try something else.
Exactly.
Do you get what I'm saying? So maybe you didn't recognize that.
Because it's part of what we do.
It's part of what we do.
And lots of educators do. And we can talk about the nuance about switching. There's a switch that has to happen. But yes, there's empathy, there's emotional intelligence, all of that stuff that we all have as those innate skills.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't really think much of it. And then she said, it sounds like what you're doing is coaching. And I said, oh, interesting. She said, if you're interested in this, I have a colleague that I can recommend who does training. I trained with them, and there were no other educators on that program. They were all from corporate and very different industries. And so I was petrified. You feel, and a lot of teachers feel this, like stepping outside of our zone will feel this imposter syndrome.
Yes.
What do I have to bring to the table?
Yes.
Who am I to be saying anything in this? They're very important people with big fancy titles, right?
Yeah. Julie, I want to interrupt you and say, this is why you're here today.
Yeah.
This is why I've brought you to my audience. You've got a huge following online, but I wanted to share you because I follow you and I connect with so much of what you say resonates with my heart. And so I feel so vulnerable saying this to you. Julie, so many times we don't recognize our skill as educators. I think we live in this box of this is our space, this is where we operate, this is our little space away from corporate. And so this is where we should stay. And so when we move to those very important spaces in society with those professionals out there, we can feel like we're imposters. And so I feel it's so important for people like you to come and meet us, to come and bring a voice to who we are. We are professionals. We are doing very important work.
Very important. The most important work.
Absolutely. But we need to see ourselves as those people.
And it's really important, and you interview lots of people who can be that bridge to go the other way.
Right.
So when I'm in the room with people who are in different industries, let's just put it like that, where we would typically be maybe slightly intimidated to represent education in the room. To say, this is what's happening in education today. Yes. I often spend a lot of time trying to dispel these myths and like education isn't working and it's broken and that, gosh, it's not perfect. And there's lots of systems that we're working within that make it difficult and challenging.
Right.
However, your perception of what is happening in education is based on your experience, which might have been 30 years ago.
Right.
Please accept that things have moved on.
Absolutely.
Please accept that we know what we're doing here.
Yes.
And every day, for every moment, we are caring for your children, and our intention is, how can we prepare them for the world?
Absolutely.
That's it.
I love that. I love that. I love that you've said it, and I want that to resonate with our audience, that we know the importance and the value that we bring to society, and that when we go out there, that we truly represent. And I want to say also, as early years educators, because I think we sometimes perceive ourselves as the lowest in the rank and file.
Yes.
I remember very often starting out as an educator, people would say to me, what do you do for a living? And I'd say, I'm a teacher. And they're like, where do you teach? And I'm like, at the nursery school. And I'm like, but in a very patronizing kind of, that's so cute, And I'm like, I've studied, I'm a trained professional. What I do, the foundational years are so important. I'm bringing, like you said, skill and value to one of the most important aspects of life. And so I want us to hear what you're saying, that we're important and we bring value and we should be appreciated as educators.
I have such a soft spot for early years, and I'm not an early years teacher by training. However, I did spend a lot of time because I knew it was an area I didn't know very much about. I'm actually secondary trained, but I've worked in primary schools, and I'm usually at the top, sort of a key stage 2, maybe key stage 3, so kind of 7 years old up.
Right.
But I would deliberately spend time in the areas that I didn't have experience in. Early years being one of them. And I always advocate for early years educators in all of my trainings, because I say things, most of our work is to do with language and communication. And when I'm working with staff who are sort of further up the age groups, I'll say, go down to early years. They are masters of verbal feedback. Why? Because the children can't read or write yet. So you want to know how to do verbal feedback, whole class feedback? Go and have a look.
Yeah.
They're doing it all the time.
Yes.
And also, broadly, I say, yes, the people who will say, early years, we have to be really careful with our language, and obviously my focus is on language. I will always sort of tweak or correct when someone says, I'm going down to early years. It's a diminishing
Absolutely.
feeling.
Yes.
I'll go up to, and I know they mean chronologically maybe,
Yes.
but also there's a feeling like down there.
Affiliation
There's
to the
stuff
negative, to
stuff
the
that
lower.
happens down there.
Yes.
It's like separate.
Yes.
No,
Yes.
this is the bedrock. This is the foundation. So yeah, if you're going to talk about down there, what you're talking about is this, everything else is built on.
Yes.
So if you would like to come and see the foundation, then
Thank you. Thank you. Julie, we are an education built on caring, on professionalism, on guidance. What kind of a role does coaching and mentoring play for educators?
Oh, we could be here for so long. I'm going to try and keep it brief. Obviously, I'm hugely passionate about the impact of coaching. What I would say, first of all, as like a provocation to your listeners is, when have you had a conversation about your professional self that where you felt really heard, really listened to, non-judgmental, not because you were trying to meet a target, not because you were trying to finish your appraisal, none of that, just that open conversation, not justifying, not defending, nothing, just exploration. And the role that coaching can bring to education is that shift from transactional to transformational, from judgmental to developmental. Those are the spaces where trust is created, vulnerability is opened up, and that's when real learning happens.
Right.
I don't know why we don't know this. It's so obvious. We know it with our children.
Yeah.
And so often that's not mirrored with the adults in the organisation.
Yes.
Just as your conversation, I know, because I sort of heard some of your conversation with Stephanie, when people feel safe, when people feel cared for, when people feel happy, then they make progress.
Yeah.
It's the same for adults. It's really simple.
Yes.
So the foundation of that is, let's make people feel safe. That means we have to remove judgment. We have to remove it and replace it with curiosity and openness, so that they can say, some of the best coaching conversations, internal coaching conversations I've had, is when staff feel safe enough to say, I don't know what I'm doing with this. Or everyone's talking about this thing and I don't know what it is. And if you can get to that point, amazing. Because then you're in.
That sounds like freedom.
Yeah.
That sounds like trust.
Yeah.
I have to pause. That is so real, what you're saying, that our educators sometimes don't feel safe enough to articulate that they don't know. And our job as leaders, I feel like I personally have fallen short in that space. You know, I really feel that I haven't perhaps been able to make people feel safe enough for them to say, I don't know. I don't know. And looking at, as myself, as a leader, or as a colleague, as a leader, our role then would be to coach them out of that place of not knowing.
Yeah.
That's why we're the leaders.
Yeah.
That's why we've been entrusted with
Exactly.
that role, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So I think very often, and I'll reflect to self, you know, that when those challenging scenarios have occurred, that I would approach it with judgment. You haven't done this. Can we fix this? You know, as opposed to what you're saying, we need to be transformational and not so transactional. What would that look like, Julie?
This is something that again, when I'm working in schools where I see that happening, it's so difficult because I want to give you a metric, I want to give you those kind of things, but sometimes it's immeasurable. It's I was talking to somebody yesterday about the feeling when you step into a school and you just think, this is a great place. I don't know why. But it's intangible in a way.
Right.
It's the way that someone greeted you. It was the interaction you saw with the children, that they were happy and bubbly and whatever, and the way that staff feel and look. So it's, in terms of the way that it feels in an organisation when you move to transformational rather than transactional, it can be seen in micro interactions. If you want to see big picture, it looks like teachers who have autonomy, teachers who are open to learning, teachers who seek out development, teachers who are open to experimenting because they feel safe to do so.
Yes.
They want to share. They feel valued, so they stay. And I know that we'll want to talk about what are some of the benefits and you know, or the return on investment in coaching. If you want to talk about a tangible one, it's just about teacher retention.
Yes.
Where they feel
Huge.
safe, where they feel happy.
Huge for us
Yes.
in the early years. You know, I
Yes.
spoke on a previous episode with Sari Saliba, and we spoke about teacher retention. And we were saying that a lot, post-COVID, a lot of our educators in the early years have moved up. Have moved up to primary school. See, there's that language. But they've left the early years and gone to teach in primary schools where, you know, they have perhaps a better benefit than in the earlier settings. And again, I don't want to promote that too much because we want to hold on to our teachers, but this is profound that you're saying that just one of the key impacts that coaching could have for the team would be that we would be able to retain our teachers, and perhaps that the monetary value, monetary remuneration for their work that they do is not the be end and the end all of them staying in this industry particularly.
It's not the key driver. If I'm honest, it's never the key driver for lots of educators because their metric for success is impact. But of course, we've got to eat. We've got to pay for our holidays, our family, whatever. So yes, of course, money plays a role in that. But where you feel like culture is right, you stay. You know, and so, coaching can play a real role in that.
So tell me, what are those huge impacts that coaching could have on our teams, the tangibles?
Okay, so it will be where I've seen from the schools that I've worked in where coaching has been really successful is that you see this, back to that conversation about professional, right? I was speaking with a principal about this recently, and he was talking about we are professionals and we feel this passionately. A professional is someone I feel that sits into these two camps. They are both people who are learners and wanting to develop and constantly working on their craft, and they are experts in their field. And being experts in your field means that you also are open to having that quality assurance and high standards, adhering to high standards.
Yes.
So these two things happen in tandem. When only the quality assurance is happening, but not this part, then it feels judgmental, restrictive, punitive, critical. Criticism feels hard, you feel defensive. When you're in a culture where both of these things coexist, you feel heard, valued, you feel like the subject matter expert, you feel as though you have a role to play. It's just all of those things. Now, I know those aren't necessarily these kind of like I said, I'm not saying like 50% of people who take part in coaching all X, Y, Z. That there are stats, by the way, about those kind of things in terms of well-being, in terms of feeling a better sense of engagement with work, feeling more connected to their work. But broadly, I want to see, first of all, a shift with self.
Yes.
The way that if I'm the teacher, the way I talk to myself,
Yes.
the way I self-regulate, manage my emotions,
Yes.
self-awareness, self-leadership, then this then widens the next concentric circle to myself and others. How do I work with my team, my colleagues, particularly if I'm leading a team? How am I going to develop others, and can I do that through a coaching approach? And then the last circle is myself and the organisation, and this would include children. So what is the impact of me having a coaching mindset and approach, all the way out to what does this look like with my work with children and parents, I suppose, within that camp. So in schools where it's deeply embedded, I see it moving into that third concentric circle where it is part of the culture of the school, everything. And I have one school in particular that's here that we have done work with the academic staff, we've done work with the non-academic team. They're really important. The person that greets somebody at the door, your head of HR, your head of finance, you best believe they're having conversations that need to be coaching in nature sometimes. They're leading teams. We worked with all of the LSAs. I've done parent sessions. I'm starting to do work with the students. All of this is how you adopt a coaching mindset. And to the point with the students, I'm also really interested in working with student leadership teams. And I know we typically see that happening in the years where they're transitioning out of education or to a different point in their education, so year 6 or year 13. But I think that developing leadership skills quite young, and oracy plays a role in that, listening plays a role in that. If we can do that all the way through, amazing.
Absolutely, we're building better humans.
Yes.
We absolutely are. And I'm coming back to, we are in a position where we can elevate ourselves and our community that we are placed in, and our workspace. And this is the theme of season 3 for me, Julie, is the business of early years. You know, hence I've brought you here, is how does coaching impact the business? You know, how do we now reach out? How do we reach the parents through our coaching, through our personal? So what does that look like? So you were speaking about this concentric circle of it starts with me, it moves out to my colleagues, and then the parents. What would that look like in practice?
Okay, so actually that's a really nice centering of the conversation, because to go back to my previous conversation around my experience with other industries, something that potentially they do better than we do in education, which is focusing on leadership and focusing on the development of myself as a leader and me as a leader of an organisation. So let's be real, particularly in the environment we're in here, people are leading organisations, they are businesses. I know that doesn't feel nice for educators to hear, and so sometimes we rally against it, but you are leading an organisation which is requiring skills that you didn't have in training. You trained to be an early years educator. You trained to be a primary school teacher. You trained, in my case, I trained to be a geography teacher, right? What did I learn in my degree that was going to help me run a business, run an organisation, be a leader of teams? None of it.
This is the mic drop. This is the mic drop. Julie, you have said it, and you've said it well. That's it. I say it and I say it again, and I'm so glad that you've raised this point. We have not been trained in leadership.
No.
And very often, especially in the early years, there is 0 to none in terms of budget for leadership, professional development. You know, in terms of running a business, it's assumed that, you know what, you've studied your master's degree, so you're eligible for a manager role in early years, or you've studied your cash level 5, and so you're eligible for. But you get into that space, and oh my goodness, you spoke about the imposter syndrome. Help us.
Help us. And let's just say, coaching, when you talk about budget, space, time, resource, energy, expertise to be able to develop leadership within settings, coaching in that space can be incredibly effective. Yes. Because yes, you might need some expert input to start with, to show you, to role model what a good one looks like, all of that kind of stuff, just like we would do with the children. But my ultimate aim, and it's a terrible business model, and I say it to all the schools I work with, is for you to no longer need me. This should be self-sustaining, because I've imparted skills to you, knowledge, and now we've set up a system where coaching and development is happening for yourself. And yes, you might want to look outside sometimes for that slightly detached reflection with somebody.
Right.
But if you're having this, you're my principal or you're my leader, and you are developing me through a series of coaching conversations, then you don't need an external to do that. It's actually a very cost-effective way of developing teams, because it doesn't need a constant, we're not having to renew a license or buy another product or, anything. It's just human interaction that we've just got really good at.
Yeah.
And so it's free, essentially.
You're looking to shift the culture.
Yes, absolutely, 100%. 100%. Yeah.
This is profound. This is noble. This is profound. This is needed.
Yes.
You spoke earlier on in our conversation about letting the people outside know that we are evolving. We have evolved from 30 years ago. I think this is that key space. That we are evolving as individuals, as human beings first, as educators. We take the responsibility and say, I am responsible for taking the skills. And some of us are veterans. We've been in the industry for nearly 30 years, So I trained 30 years ago.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But you have to take it upon yourself to say, what am I doing to get me to the next place? And so coaching would be that place. Yeah?
Exactly.
In an earlier setting, Julie, what would that look like for us? If we were to contact you and say, help. If we were to inbox you on Instagram and say, Julie, I'm the manager of this nursery school, help. What would that look like?
I cannot believe that you have used that word, and I don't know whether it's because you're familiar with the stuff that I put out or on my website. We have our method, which is called the help method.
Absolutely.
You've done your research. That was not an accident. I can't believe it. No, I knew it was too well paid. So the help method is and you can use us, but you can take this and think, how can I use this myself? Right. Is our method, it's tried, tested, now trademarked as our way of embedding a coaching culture. Right. So the acronym is HELP, and it starts with H. H is hook. Let's get people excited about it. You don't need me to do that, but it helps if there's somebody that's experienced and wants, passionate about it and says, come on guys, this is going to be brilliant.
Yes.
So
that's the manager. Yes, that would be the leader. Yes. That would be the curriculum coordinator. That says, girls, ladies, gentlemen,
gather round.
Yes.
Let me tell you about something that's going to change your life.
Okay.
That's that kind of thing, right? So we get people pumped up. It's also a moment to ask about experience, because there may be people in your team who have experienced coaching. They may be the recipient of it. They may have done some training, even small bit of, maybe they did it on their own. Oh, I watched this thing. There's so much popular culture around essentially what is coaching, that they may find that they actually have an interest in this without really realizing, because they've watched 20 Instagram videos about how to ask great questions.
Right.
That's coaching, right? So ask them, has anyone here had any formal or informal coach training? Great. We find, 1, 2, 3 of you, let's start a coach working party. Let's start talking about it. The third question I asked during that kind of hook bit is there anyone here who has had a negative experience of coaching? It's important, because we're going to recalibrate that now. Because in the worst scenarios, coaching is used as an expression to essentially manage people out of their roles. So I'm going to coach you. You're failing, and so you need coaching.
Right.
No. We work from strengths-based.
Right.
The strongest people get coached. Everybody gets coached, but this is to move you from strength to strength.
Right.
To borrow from sport, as I said, I'm not sporty, but the best in the world needs a coach.
Yes.
The best sports people in the world
Absolutely.
have
The
coaches.
best in the world have a team of coaches.
Exactly.
Yes.
So this is not for people who are failing.
Yeah.
It's for everybody.
I love it.
And we're moving forward. So it's to also calm the nerves of people who go, hang on a minute, and I've got to go for a coaching session. That means what?
Yeah.
Is my job on the line?
Yes.
Do I need to be worried?
Yes.
So that's hook, that's H.
Yeah.
E of help is experiencing coaching. Too often, maybe it's a affliction of educators. We want to learn straight away. But what happens if you move to learn and training too quickly is that you miss out the experience of doing it, being in receipt of it. So we coach people. That's how we start off. So you would have some external coaching from people who know how to do it, so that you're getting it role model for you, so that you know what it feels like when you've been coached really well. And then you also develop empathy for what it's like to be on the other side of the table.
Right.
So you're like,
so
hey,
important.
this is different kind of conversation.
Yes.
This feels vulnerable. How do I create the psychological safety to have a conversation that feels, how did my coach do it?
Yeah.
So you have the example there. Plus also, it's great CPD, even if you just did that on its own.
Right.
No
right.
learning.
Yes.
We know that learning works really well when it's regular and it's highly personalised. That's what coaching is.
Absolutely.
It's just about you.
Yeah.
That's it. And then the next stage is learn. So where we equip people with the coaching skills so that they can start having coaching conversations themselves, and they should leave that section, because it's several inputs of training that allow them to feel like, I really know how to listen well. And oh my goodness, this is a skill that it's a skill you have to work on, even as an educator, where you feel like, I really know what it means to listen well.
Yeah.
Oh, let me tell you, that was a re-education
Yeah.
for me, because I was like, I really felt I knew how to listen well. And as I said, predisposition for empathy and whatever. But when I could feel it changing, as I was practicing my coaching, I was like, man, this is intense.
Yeah.
And I would feel...
It's intense because it's intentional.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I know off camera we were speaking about focus, and sometimes our ability to focus. Educators are multi-skilled at multitasking.
Oh yes, not the best thing about us. It's a good thing, but it's not a good thing.
It happens by necessity.
Yeah.
But what byproduct of that is that you train your brain to be thinking about lots of things at the same time.
Yeah.
Coaching retrains your brain to think, the only thing we're doing right now is this conversation.
Yes.
And I'm focusing on you, I'm focusing on the words, that's it. And actually it's so liberating. I find it to be such a mindful practice.
Yes.
I find it exhausting,
Yes.
but mindful.
Absolutely.
Because I'm just in this moment. There's no distraction. I'm not looking at my phone. I'm not thinking about my to-do list. I'm not anything. I'm just with you. I'm very present with you. And the other person feels that.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
They
Anyway,
feel heard.
They feel heard.
They feel respected in that space.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they feel safe. We were talking about creating a safe space for our teams.
Yeah.
Because if we're intentionally listening to them and really focused into
listening.
what they're sharing with us,
Yeah.
they feel the empathy coming from us. They feel the humanity in our engagement, right?
Absolutely.
Oh, I love this.
And so we learn about active listening. We also learn about asking effective questions. And again, it's a skill that we feel we do a lot of questioning in class. Obviously, in our schools, and we are, so to some extent, masters of questioning. However, coaching questioning is slightly different.
So no Bloom's taxonomy? No.
Well, I mean, some of that will come into it, but it's about saying, really thinking, what is the purpose of this question?
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, when we're in teaching, the purpose of the question is so that I understand that you understand. But in coaching, it just changes slightly. It's not about me as a coach at all. So I use this in training as an example all the time. I'll have somebody, and usually a woman, I will say this is, they will explain something really articulately, really beautifully, and they've sort of brain dumped the challenge, let's say. And then they'll be speaking for about 5 minutes and then they'll go, does that make sense?
Do you understand?
And I was like, did it make sense to you, is my question. Because it doesn't matter whether it makes sense to me. Do you feel you articulated it well enough? Did you miss anything out? Would you like to add anything? Do you want to rephrase anything that you said? That's it. It's not about the other person anymore. It's about you saying this out loud so that you are making sense of it.
Yeah.
That's the purpose of it.
Yeah.
So effective questioning, and then there are some models that we teach and different things that can help people get started with coaching in their organisation. And then the final part, the most important part, I always say, they're all important, is P, which is practice.
Right.
And I always use my darling husband as an example. He's a great guitarist. And that is because I see him, he's never had formal lessons, but he learned himself, but he's always picking up the guitar and always practicing. And, you know, I hear, you have to love it, but you hear like sections of songs being played again and again and again until we get it. Yeah. Unless you're practicing, you can't call yourself a guitarist.
Right.
Unless you're practicing, you can't call yourself a coach.
Yes.
And there's a bit of a bugbear about people who call themselves coaches without qualification and without practice.
Right.
So if you want to be practicing coach-like skills, you don't have to call yourself a coach, but you do need to practice. That's where the learning happens.
Yes.
That's where you figure out, oh, that question wasn't quite right, next time I'll change it.
Yes.
I jumped in too fast.
Yes.
Whatever.
Yeah.
So practice, and we facilitate the practice. That's important, and that's where our background as educators is really important. So when I go into a school, I'm not coming in cold. I'm not just coming in with theory. I'm not coming in from another industry. I'm sitting alongside you as another educator and saying, right, let's talk about how we can practically use this in your role in this school in this moment.
Yeah.
Because I understand. I have empathy. I don't completely understand because I'm not you, but I have empathy with what's going on.
I think your role as a former teacher sets you up perfectly for that role, because you really can. You have insight into what we're experiencing.
Exactly.
Right.
And there can be some shortcuts, like you don't need to explain to me, the setup of a classroom or the running of a school. Like, we can shortcut some of that. So when you say, this is something that's great, that I feel like it is different from different industries, when people say, I don't know whether I have time to do coaching, my goodness, in education, we are so busy. Yeah. And that is a real pressure. Yeah. Time. Like, when people say we're busy, and I think, do you know what busy is? Come and be in a school. Yes. Come and be in an early years setting.
Yes, absolutely.
Now let's think about what busy looks
is.
like.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's a real challenge, and I understand it. So I say to people, first of all, we start by having coaching conversations where conversations are happening anyway. Right. We're not adding new conversations. Right. We're just making the conversations we have a little bit better. Right. That's it.
So in our engagement with one another, in the corridor, in our emails to one another, how do we speak with one another? What is our tone when we're engaging in a meeting? Is that what you're talking about? Yeah.
And us as an organisation, but then further, as we've spoken, what does it look like with children, with parents? I'm going to have those interactions with parents anyway. Yes. So how can I make them a little bit better? Yes. That's it.
Julie, I love it. Last words for our audience.
Oh my goodness.
We at that place.
No, we can't be. I want to talk forever. Last words. So, I listened to the back end of one of your podcasts just now, and her last words were so eloquent, and I was thinking, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to come up with some really good last words. And so I'm going to use her model, which is to reference somebody else who has inspired me. And that person is somebody called Michael Bungay Stainer, and he is a coach, famous coach. I actually asked him to be my mentor because, why not? Forget about that imposter syndrome. Reach out to your heroes. Reach out to your idols. Be bold. Yes. He said no. It doesn't matter.
But that's okay.
It doesn't matter. Yes. That's because if you didn't ask, you don't get, right? Yes. So he wrote a book called The Coaching Habit. And the biggest takeaway of that is, how can I stay curious for longer? That's it. So if you remember one thing, if you think, okay, I don't have the tools, the time, the money to train to be a coach, can you think about your next interaction? How can I stay curious for longer? And that will stop you jumping in and will allow you to ask another question. It doesn't have to be a perfect question, but it will go deeper for that person on that issue. So how can you stay curious for longer?
Thank you, Julie. It is my profound privilege to have had you here with me today. Thank you so much, and just for sharing your experience, your knowledge with us. I would love for our listeners to follow you, and perhaps you can do a little segment for us, or open yourself up to coaching for us as earlier specific.
Absolutely.
You know, that you could think around ways that you could bring what you're doing in the other schools, bring it home for us as well, because a lot of what you're putting out, a lot of your content, like I said earlier, just resonates so much with my soul, and nothing so profound as you having successfully pivoted your career out of education. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
I wish you every success with what you're doing, and again, just thank you for what you're doing for us as educators.
Thank you so much for having me here.
That was Julie Keys reminding us that when coaching becomes a part of our culture, we begin our journey to empowering our teams. Join us again for reflective conversations right here on Let's Talk Early Years. You will find us on Instagram, on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. See you next time.